This is an old, huge office file cabinet I dragged home from my job 7 years ago. And in this video, I turned it into the ultimate air compressor cabinet setup to make it quieter and protect me if it ever blows up. My air compressor used to sit on this random cart I got from the University of Wisconsin surplus store. So I pulled it off the cart and I shoved it in the cabinet, and magic, I was done. Thanks for watching. One problem was that the cord had nowhere to go, of course, so I drilled a hole, added a rubber bushing to cover the sharp edge, and ran the power cable through. I wasn't going to be able to easily hit the power switch on the air compressor anymore, so I wired up an exterior switch to turn it on and off instead. And I wired in another thing that I got from my old job, a big red light off a radio tower. This way I'll have a big warning that the air compressor is on before I leave the shed. I had previously removed the doors to store drawers and things, so I reinstalled those. At this point, I checked sound levels. With the doors open, the air compressor hit 82 decibels. With doors closed, it went as low as 75 decibels. Still not great, but I planned to revisit this later. You may have noticed the missing handle on this door. That's because these handles are made of copper, and this one broke 7 years ago, shortly after I brought it home. So now was the time to fix it. I first tried to braze it, but I didn't have the screw part held down, and that meant that it could move when trying to melt metal into it. So this failed. Instead of trying again, I decided to just brute force fix it with the mini mill. I cut off all of the old broken screw. I drilled a hole. I tapped it. And I glued in a steel screw. Then I reinstalled it with this cool lock mechanism. And it worked. There we go, sweet. Though I guessed wrong on the orientation of the handle, of course, so I fixed that quick. Now I needed to get the air out of the cabinet. I came up with about 50 different ideas to do this, but ultimately just went with the ultra high-tech stick a pipe through a hole method. And I used a 1/2-inch max air line kit to run with air around the shop. I took the long way around because people recommended having about 50 feet of pipe outside of the compressor to give space for the air to cool down before getting to your tools. This prevents moisture from getting into whatever you're using, evidently. And that worked fairly well. The installation wasn't perfect. It's somewhat challenging to get perfectly straight, intentionally sloping pitched lines in a situation like this. So I'm sure the plumbers among us would see this and want to banish me from society, but I figured I could start somewhere and tweak this later when there were problems. Then I installed this air hose reel from Vevor, which they sent to me to review, and I'll say I was skeptical of it because my experience with air hose reels hasn't been great. It seems like they never do what you want them to do for retracting or staying locked at the right length, but this one legit worked great. Then I installed an air filter and regulator so I could adjust air pressure right on the wall. With everything plumbed up, I tested it out, and there were no leaks. Back to the cabinet, I bought some 2-inch soundproofing foam. This stuff has adhesive on the back. So I swept out the inside, and I cleaned it all with degreaser. And I covered the entire inside with those soundproofing panels. I procrastinated like crazy on this because I thought it would be hard to fit them and get them to stick, but it actually was easy and they stuck well. And I taped a little piece of cardboard in front of the lock mechanism so I could still lock the doors. With that, the soundproofing was done. That meant that the last thing to do was to install a remote drain line on the bottom of the compressor. This will let me be a lazy bones and very easily drain water out of the tank instead of having to reach all the way under there. Then I loaded the compressor back in the cabinet, locked it tight, and started it up. The decibel meter was now down to 71 decibels at points. This is like going from the sound of a running lawnmower to being in a noisy office. And you can really tell. I don't feel like I need to have earmuffs on when I turn the air compressor on at this level. So I celebrated by draining the tank with the new drain hose. Heads up, if you do this, relieve the air pressure first. So there you go. This air compressor is quieter, it's easier to use, and there's a substantial layer of metal between me and it in case it ever blows up. This is way more air compressor coolness than I ever planned to have in my life, but it is still nice to have now that it's done. On to the next one. Thanks for watching.